Hey guys, it's Pablo with Meditation Amsterdam. It's pretty late on a Saturday night, and I thought I would still try to record one last little video before calling it a day. And today's topic was about a quote that I read once again on this book that we've been commenting on, which is The Hero's Journey, based on the life and conversations with Joseph Campbell. And the the gist of the quote is that the the Christ and the Buddha are mythological equivalents, and that they both refer to the same thing, which is a certain state of consciousness. And I found this is an idea that has really resonated in my mind for a very, very long time, even before I started to read any of the stuff that I read nowadays. And I like it for two different reasons. One is that it is essentially making it not so much about the individuals themselves. So is this cult of the individual and a religion based on a certain character being special is the opposite of what we're trying to explore here. And by not making it about the individual, it becomes a universal something that gives us a lot of hope, let's say. So if I try to unpack that, I would say that if we take aside the idea that these two characters live so far back in the past that their historicity and their mythological character is fairly difficult to separate, then you still have this idea that they are people who attained a certain level of consciousness, essentially, right? So you'll remember that the person that we refer to as the Christ was an individual called Jesus of Nazareth, right? Now, Jesus was born, and assuming that he was historical, what we know from the Bible is he was born, and at some point, maybe in his early teens or whatever, he disappears, right? There's no account for the guy's life for a couple of decades, and then he comes back and is able to pull off a number of cool things. And then you have the Buddha, who as an individual is the Prince Gautama, and he goes through a very methodical and extensive process of trying to attain enlightenment until one day it finally happens, and that's when he doesn't really even become the Buddha, but the Buddha mind manifests in him, just as the Christ mind manifested in Jesus of Nazareth, and that is exactly the point that Joseph Campbell is trying to make, which is that it's not about the individual himself. And so this is not too, when you think about other instances where this happens, it starts to become a little bit more clear. Perhaps the Buddha and the Christ are like the highest examples of human consciousness being attained. But there's a lot of steps on that continuum. So you could have someone like a genius or a shaman reaching fairly high levels of consciousness and mental vibration by embracing certain practices and certain ways of life. And whenever you're dealing with someone who's a healer or a shaman, and assuming that they're not some kind of charlatan, it will usually be the case that they don't take credit for the things that they're accomplishing in terms of a certain patient or an individual subject becoming better or becoming healed. It'll rarely be the case that they go, I achieved this. What is usually the case, and this is very, very common, and it's even embedded in the word channeling, is that they acknowledge that there is a certain something that is going through them, and which is making things happen in the external world, perhaps to other people, right? So this is not just being humble and let's say not trying not to get the ego to stand in the way, but it is a recognition that it is not so much about them as individuals, but there is a certain consciousness to which they have become open, and that is making certain things happen, right? So now we can then get into, so how does that work, right? How does a certain level of consciousness then starts to manifest things in the outside world, especially with other people, and then once again you have even more basic examples of how that happens. If you think about hypnosis, for example, right? So hypnotherapists will tell you that they know that they can't you can't enforce hypnosis onto someone else, but it's more like a energetic mental dance in which you put yourself into a certain space first, and by knowing how to lead, you lead the other person, in this case a patient, into that similar mental space. How does that work? Well, through posture, through certain tone of voice, through the use of certain hypnotic patterns of language that tend to disorient the mind a little bit, distract you a little bit perhaps. Certain practices like making you hold your hand up, or you name it. So, but you are transmitting as a therapist a certain energy that is picked up by, that is subtly picked up by the person receiving it. Now, those are still gross examples, right? Even within tone of voice, you can have different levels. So it has been proven that when you are stressed, your diaphragm is not open, and your entire breathing system becomes compressed, and that makes your voice very, very flat, actually, right? Very, it's just not very resonant. Whereas when you're open and relaxed, and the right type of hormones like serotonin are in your body, then you have this open, resonant tone of voice, and your partner or your subject is picking up on those cues, even though they don't know about it, and therefore a certain inner attitude can put another person into a similar state of mind. And if we went even further and went to the area of energy, so practices like Tai Chi believe that we are surrounded by and contain a certain type of energy. If we made it very simple, we could even talk just about electromagnetism. And it's not that far-fetched to think that we, just like the planet Earth, have poles and a certain electromagnetic field around us, which is generated mainly by the heart, but also a little bit by the brain, and also by that large battery that is made up of our digestive tract, right? So you can measure these things, as a matter of fact. So the electromagnetism around a person can be measured, and therefore there might be a certain sense of where another person is coming from by the way they're moving, the way they're talking, and maybe even if we stretch it a little bit further, by the type of energy that they are radiating around them. But back to the original point of this video is this idea that again the Christ and the Buddha are perhaps equivalent examples of how an individual can reach a very, very high level of consciousness by certain observances, certain practices like meditation or mindfulness practices. And it makes it so that Buddhahood, or Christhood, if you want to call it that, is not something that is exclusive. I've always resented this notion of exclusivity and the chosen one and all these kind of things. It is more about examples of, guys, this is what's possible, and you don't have to make it all the way up there. You can work yourself up the continuum, and as you do, your life becomes richer, more rewarding. You become kinder, you become more relaxed, and so on. And then as you keep going up, it seems to be that you can go to a very, very, very high level, and then your life becomes ever more interesting, and you become much more of a positive influence to those around you. So I thought I would share that as a late night Saturday evening video. I hope it sounded interesting. Last weekend I relaunched my website meditationamsterdam.com. So if you watch this video, go check it out and see if anything there catches your attention. Cheers.